Our speaker this afternoon is Kim Ann Curtin. Kim is a born and bred New Yorker. Having risen above great personal challenges, Kim incorporates the same key principles and techniques of UnNetworking that she used to survive those years into her coaching and training practice. Kim's desire to empower others led her to open thecoachshop.com, leaving behind a six-figure salary in the corporate world so that she could share what she learned on her path to personal and professional fulfillment. In 2007, after completing a personal development course, she chose to become a certified coactive coach. In 2008, in response to the economic crisis, she took her coaching outside the New York Stock Exchange on Wall Street to give back to those in need and meet future prospects. She launched thewallstreetcoach.com in 2009. Kim's coaching has been featured with CNN.Money, Fortune Magazine, Smart Money, USA Today, TheStreet.com, and Associated Press. Without any further ado, please welcome Kim Ann Curtin.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate everybody coming today, especially since you all want to get home and you might be running out the door, so feel free to go if you have to go. I was asking everybody to sit towards the front, so thank you guys for all doing that. One of the things that I am a big believer in is that networking in and of itself is not effective. And I learned that at a very young age because of the lifestyle that I was living. Just a little bit about me. My parents were divorced at a really early age, and they had a fairly volatile divorce case, one that involved a lot of publicity. So I was dealing with reporters and things like the Phil Donahue Show at a fairly young age. And one of the things I was really adept at was how those reporters, judges, were making assumptions about me based on a split-second piece of information. Perhaps it was how I was dressed, perhaps it was how I said something, and I began to start to put together what I realized was their story of me. And I think that's when, in a lot of ways, my marketing side of my brain started to wake up, because it was teaching me, they think I'm this, whatever this is, but that's not me. But then I started to put together all of those pieces is why they were thinking that. Because this was there, that was there, and this was there. Oh, of course, that would be what would bring them to the end of this equation. So that is basically what I'm going to try to do today, is get you connected to how you're presenting yourself. To every human being, from a gas station attendant to the CEO of a billion-dollar company, he's making assumptions about you. And I'm not asking you to be something that you're not. I'm not going to suggest you go down that route. But what I'm going to ask you to do is make sure that the consistency of what it is that you are, the consistency of how you show up when you're meeting people, all matches what your ultimate objective is. The reason I chose that language, UnNetworking, is because I want you to connect to the fact that it's really building authentic relationships. That is what makes all the difference. And authentic relationships really begin with you being connected to what that other person needs. It is not a one-shot deal. It is a lifetime of behaving this way. And when the chips are down and you have to pay the light bill, it's really scary to think, but what if that doesn't give me the outcome? I have to go to this networking event, Kim, because if I don't get a client right away, my business is in trouble, my boss is going to be mad. But that's why you have to think of this as long tail. This is a long tail way of changing your whole life, of changing the way people treat you, of changing opportunities that come to you. Because of this skill that I developed at a very early age, I have had doors open to me that are so ridiculous. And I'm just sometimes in awe of how that happens because of one simple thank you I gave to somebody. So this was something that just happened a couple of months ago. Just as an example, I was at PE Hub. It's an online magazine for people who are in the private equity industry. I had not gone to this event before. I was, certainly the only one there. I was probably close to the, one of 3 women at this 100-person event. And I happened to start talking to a gentleman at the bar and asked him where Jonathan Marino was. He's the editor of PE Hub. I thought, well, he's the one throwing the party. I want to say thank you to him. And he pointed him out. He's like, that's him in that suit with that colored tie. And I was like, awesome. So I left. I hit it off with Jonathan, asked him a lot of questions about PE Hub, acted interested. I wasn't acting, and I was interested. So I was just asking him all these questions. He winds up asking me if I would write for their blog. All this great stuff happened. 2 hours went by, and I was like, wow, I got to go thank that guy, Etan, who introduced me to him. All I did was walk back to where the guy was, and I said, Etan, I just want to say thanks so much. It was a really valuable conversation I had. Thanks for pointing him out to me. He's like, where do you come from? I was like, is he offended? I didn't know what happened. He's like, I was like, I'm just being polite, to let you know. He's like, I know you're being polite. I don't understand why you're doing that. And I was like, because I think it's the right thing to do. So since then, that man has sent me more potential business opportunities because I went back and just said thank you to him. To this day, I'm talking about you now, telling them, there are polite people in the finance world, or whatever his perception is. So that one little thing that you can do for somebody, just saying a thank you, can rock your world, can open up opportunities you don't even see coming. All right, so the first thing I want to do, because this is something I've experienced at some of the other meetings, there are people all in this room right now that might be somebody that you will be happy to know. And you probably wouldn't have normally had an opportunity to meet them. So I'm going to give you a couple of tips and tricks of things to start in conversations with people instead of, hi, my name is Kim. How are you today? I'm good. Those things, it's fine, but if you can start a conversation with people without an introduction, that makes things a little bit less forced and a little less formal. Everybody is just a human being like you. They have, needs. They have things going on in their life that maybe are not so pleasant. Could be medical, could be financial, could be family stuff. So if you can just start to think of other people having those kinds of things just like you, I think it makes the approach a little bit different. So one of the things I like to suggest to people is it's a famous phrase. Everybody, I think, uses this, but it's one where you would say to the person, if you really knew me, you would know that I blank. So I'll start. And what I'm going to ask you to do is turn to the person to your right and tell them this about you. And then wait, of course, in response to hear about what theirs is. So if you really knew me, well, you'd know that I give free hugs every year on the Sunday after Thanksgiving. So I'm going to ask you to turn to the person next to you and tell them something a little bit intimate. It doesn't have to be, open heart surgery, but something a little bit, your hobby, your favorite music, something a little bit unexpected, but somebody, a true friend of yours would know about you. Go. If you really knew me. Hi. All right, guys. I'm going to lasso you all back. You have to tell him something. If you really... So would you be willing to share, even just shout, well, I know we're not supposed to shout it out because of the recording, but if you'll just tell me what that was like for you? Yeah? Well, was it what you expected to hear about that person? Right? So, like, can you see there's like a whole Grand Canyon of information about that person that you just did not? And if you were at a typical networking event, that probably wouldn't have been something you would have said. But now you have it in your back pocket. I would agree that you probably don't want to start out that way, but you want to just be like, you know, coming up with something that sets you apart. There's one great trick that I learned a long time ago. I was invited to the Four Seasons 50th anniversary party. The Four Seasons restaurant in New York City might be the most expensive restaurant in the world. Certainly is in New York City. And, you know, guest list, Martha Stewart, Henry Kissinger, Dalai Lama, just regular people. It was a really hard time for me. I was really not very happy with myself professionally, personally. I was so insecure and so not in a good space. It was the last place I wanted to go. And I was like, how am I going to do this? Who am I to go to this party? This is ridiculous. And I had a really amazing conversation with a friend right before I went in, and she's like, pick 2 colors. I was like, 2 colors? What are you talking about? She says, just pick them. Okay, I picked beige and navy blue. I don't know why. I went to FIT, so, you know, I like fashion. So I picked beige and navy blue. She's like, everybody that has on those 2 colors tonight, you have to go up and introduce yourself to. And I was like, what? She's like, that will get you out of yourself, right? What stops us from being able to build an authentic relationship with somebody? Usually it's our insecurity. Usually because we're kind of, in a way, self-absorbed. Because we're so like, oh my gosh. I mean, I don't know about you, but have you ever felt like they're going to find out about me? Like, imposter syndrome. Do you know 90% of people are walking around with that? 90% of the people feel they're imposters, feel like they're kidding everybody. That means that everybody else in this room, maybe then a couple of people, are the only ones in this room that don't feel like they're a fraud. So it means you have a lot of company. You're not the only one. Including the more famous and the more rich that you are, sometimes that makes you feel even less secure. So if you think that everybody else is there, but again, you can't because you're still feeling not good about yourself. So that night, all I did was look at people and think, not are they too famous or too wealthy or are they too successful for me to introduce myself? They got beige and navy blue on. I got to go up to them. The amazing conversations that came out of that, and that is a great opening. When you go up to somebody and you're like, hi, I have to come up to you and introduce myself to you. Really? How come? Well, you have on beige and navy blue. What does that mean? I have a hard time at these events. I don't really know how to break the ice sometimes. This kind of an event, I'm fine at every other kind of. The Four Seasons, I was a little intimidated. Even me, the master UnNetworker, I was like, oof. And I said, well, this is my trick. What do you think? And they were like, that is the best thing I ever heard. I got to do that. Hey, John, let me tell you about this great trick. And then before you knew it, we were all friends, sharing like vulnerable stories with each other. So the key is vulnerability. Be willing to be vulnerable. And the other key is you can build relationships, especially all of you, you're all working online. You think you can't do this when you're not in person. It's not true. I tweeted this morning an amazing, amazing way that somebody was authentic and vulnerable and a little witty at the same time, and I've asked Ed Hustler to read it for us if he's willing. Thank you.
Alrighty, people. So, konnichiwa, bitches. Are you looking for the most kick-ass fucking roommate that ever lived? If so, look no further. You fucking found him. I'm a 25-year-old professional marketing agent with experience at badass companies in New York fucking City. That's right, what you know about experience. I graduated from Auburn University in Alabama and moved to New York City at the ripe, tender age of 22. After deciding that New York was a stinky shithole, I moved back to Alabama to cultivate more professional experience. Why? So I can make millions of dollars and not have to post shit like this on Craigslist.
So this is an extreme example, But this man has NPR now ready to interview him. He has had so many people who have said, you don't even have to pay me. You can just come and live with me. I live on the beach. I own a mansion. La, 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 la. And what I understand, this is a friend of a friend who posted this. He literally had posted 3 times on Craigslist and had gotten nowhere. And then he thought, that's it. I'm going full out. I'm going to just, the way I talk, the way I am with my friends, who I authentically am. And now I'm really riled up about it. So that is an unusual way of building a relationship, but he goes on and on to tell you that he can cook, that he'll make you zucchini, squash if you're a vegetarian, what kind of books he reads. So he goes into lots of depth. If you go to my Twitter, you can read the whole thing, and it's still up on Craigslist. So he's probably going to get a better job than the one he currently has, because I think he did a really great writing job on this. The point is, though, you can build authentic relationships even by email. The key is to be focused on the other person. So if you can be centered on what it is that you're writing in that email that's going to be making it easy for the other person to respond to you. One of the things that I always suggest that everybody always include, especially if you're trying to set up an appointment with somebody really busy, you give them 3 choices. You say it all in one email. I'd love to get together with you. I have Tuesday morning available, Wednesday morning, or Friday afternoon at these times or dates. If those don't work for you, please tell me some other options. You want to make it so they can just write you back on their BlackBerry, on their they're in the middle of taking a bus ride, they can just be like, yes, the 30th works at 8 a.m. Try to just think, what would be how you would want to receive an email? The other one thing that I can't stress enough is the power of thank you in handwritten notes. I know that sounds crazy in today's world, but the impact that they have when you think about how small, how much little time it costs you to really write 3 lines in a thank you note. I received a thank you note for a workshop that I had hosted from a gentleman, Jason Womack. Handwritten, sent to my home, my business address. I was so impressed that the man took the time to do that. And I can tell you, every chance I've had to send people his way, I have done that because he went out of his way to acknowledge me. So vulnerability, gratitude. If anybody has given you information, then just let them know you really appreciated it. Even if it was a small introduction, there are probably people here who have done something, gone out of their way to help you in some way. Acknowledge them. It's so not done today. The golden rule, right? Treat other people as you would like to have them treat you. It's really not adhered to, and it's so simple. If you're getting introduced to somebody at an event, I've heard it in multiple seminars here. Just look the person in the eye, be present to them. Really pay attention to what their need is. And that's another question to always ask if you're at an event. What is it that you need? What is it that you're looking for? People can really quickly tell you. And then later on, maybe you're going to hear somebody else who has that particular situation that that guy earlier talked about, or gal. Then you're able to connect them. That's the other thing that's really powerful about building relationships, remembering what your friends need. Remembering what the people you do business with have talked about. It's not that hard to take care of them. I had gotten an unpleasant medical procedure that they had wanted to do. And intuitively, I just felt that I didn't need this procedure. I found the best radiologist in New York City to look at my x-rays, and he had a 6-week wait. I didn't have 6 weeks. I really wanted to know immediately what were those results. I thought, well, how am I going to network my way through this? How am I going to build a relationship with this doctor who's impossible to get connected to? So I went at 7 a.m. in the morning to his office, which it opened up at 7 a.m. Not only did I Dr. Joshua Gross is his name, the best radiologist in the world, in my opinion, brought him a bagel and lox, brought his secretary, the gatekeeper, always critical to include the gatekeeper, a nice Gerber daisy. That maybe cost me $9 in total. And I said, here's my x-rays. Here's what's happening for me. Now, I had to enroll the secretary in helping me. I had to enroll her in what was happening. And I said to her, I know he's really busy. I know I'm not even his patient, but here's my situation. And I gave it to her succinctly. I didn't spend an hour there. I didn't get too emotional, even though I was pretty emotional. I just tried to keep it quick, short, and right to the point. And I said, and I know I'm asking you to do something unusual. I know I'm asking you to do more than your job description asks of you, but here's a flower for your troubles. Well, I don't know if you know New York, they're like $2 Gerber daisies. They're not that expensive. She just like had this big smile on her face. She's like, you got a lot of chutzpah. I'm like, yeah, I got a serious situation on my hands. I have to make this happen. Within 5 hours, Dr. Gross had called me. So you can make that happen for yourself. It doesn't take magic. You are your unique value proposition. Brian Eisenberg was just talking about that, right? What you have to do with your website, with your brand. You yourself are your unique value proposition. There is nobody else. I don't care what their school is. I don't care what their bank account says. There's nobody quite like you. If you authentically show up, if you truly care about another person and let them know it, you are going to stand out miles above everybody else. So I'm going to ask everybody if you're willing to just share one more thing. And this time, if you can, try to talk to the person behind you or in front of you. I'd like you to just share with them something that's a dream of yours. One dream. One of my dreams is to have a house on the beach. One of my dreams is to have a home literally on the beach. Every window can see the ocean. I want to wake up hearing the ocean crash. Are we? Spring Lake, New Jersey, exactly. All right, guys, gonna pull you all back. So I'm curious, again, were you pleasantly surprised to hear some of what you heard? Would anybody be willing to share some of what you heard? Brandon, you were surprised? Were you willing to share? Can he share?
Eric wants to be a snowbird in Florida in the winter.
Very interesting, very interesting.
Buffalo, I don't blame him.
So this exercise is to just connect you to that other person's humanity, right? And it's really easy to lose sight of that. I know that at big parties, especially at big events like that, it's really easy to lose sight of the humanity. The other thing that is easy to lose sight of humanity is when you have, which I know that this happens on occasion here, people who don't look in your eyes, but they look at your name tag. And then, even more so, they look at your name tag, then look at your eyes, and then keep walking. That doesn't make you feel good. So the other tip I'm going to ask you all to do is something that comes out of one of my all-time favorite books called The Art of Possibility. Ben Zander is, Rosamund Zander as well, his wife. Ben Zander is the conductor of the Philharmonic in Boston. And in The Art of Possibility, he has a title called Giving the A. And what that means is being willing to give somebody the benefit of the doubt. Give them an A, even though what they just did maybe rubbed you the wrong way. Earlier this morning, I was leaving, I was running late, and I had to make another stop before I got here, and I inadvertently didn't hold the door for the person behind me. I didn't know they were behind me, so I didn't hold it, because I, was lost in my thoughts, lost in what I was doing, my 14 bags as a, typical New Yorker, trying to juggle everything. And I turned around when I realized the look they gave me, oh my like I killed their child. Now, she had probably had a really lousy morning, right? I mean, you can have a lousy morning even on a sunny day in New York if you're on the subway especially. Oh my God. Now, that woman, she did not give me an A. She just considered me to be one of the rudest people. And she had a whole agenda already about me. Now, I'm really sorry, I didn't see you there. Like, she wasn't listening. It was over. Would I have done that if I saw her? No, I wouldn't have. But the point is, it happens. You've done it to somebody. You've been really inadvertently rude to somebody. So imagine that that person who is at that moment having whatever they're having to you, give them a chance. Give them a second chance. Be like, you know what? Maybe they had a really rough morning. Maybe they just had their husband tell them they want a divorce. Maybe they just got told that they got fired. Giving people the A just gives them that opportunity to maybe redeem themselves. Not everybody's going to redeem themselves. That's fine. But what I'm asking you to do is just consider that there's a humanity. Just like there are people in this room that have these dreams that like you wouldn't have known of 5 minutes ago. There's a warmth in this room just because of those connections. That's the warmth every single one of you can create. I get proposed to by cab drivers in New York City all the time. Because every time I get in the cab, I do one thing. How's your day going? That's the first thing I say. Can I tell you how many times these guys will do something that they would normally not do for somebody just because I asked them how their day was? I notice them. I see them. I had one guy once, I swear to God, this was more impressive than a proposal. I was running late to catch a train, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to make it, and I'm so thirsty. Like, I was just talking to myself. And he was like, do you want water? He stopped, I swear to God, on 23rd Street, which I don't know if New York City, two sides of the street go this way, two sides, is a full street. Pulled over to the side, got out, ran across the street to the bodega, bought me a water, and wouldn't even take my money. And I was like, I cannot believe you just did that. He's like, you said you were thirsty. And I was like, now, they just don't do this in New York City, but they do it if you pay attention to them. So I must have paid attention to him. And that's what I'm just suggesting to you guys. Pay attention to the people. And you need to pay attention, obviously, to the big clients that you have. You need to pay attention to those people. But you also need to pay attention to the people that you think might not be able to do anything for you. Because I promise you, in a year, in 6 months, or less than that, they are going to be in another position. Or they are already friends with people who can. It's not that you want to be motivated by that, but it's a helpful reminder that that can have an impact later on, and that at the end of the day, everybody is connected to everybody. It is much more of a smaller world, especially in this world. This is a pretty small world. Everybody pretty much knows your reputation like that. So you're responsible for building it. It just makes the world a better place, but it does translate into business. One of the stories around finance for me, I was working as an executive assistant in the banking and finance world. I did that for 10 years in total, a little under that. And I wound up having an amazing trip to St. John in the US Virgin Islands. And I don't know if anybody's ever been there, but it's like paradise. Really good, generous friend, had a huge kind of outdoor room, multiple rooms. And I was like, oh, I really want to go, but I don't know how to pull this off. I was taking care of my mother at the time. She was really ill. And really, all my money was going to take care of that. So I thought, I can't do this vacation, but I want to. Ultimately, she was like, yeah, just come. The room's already paid for. And then another friend was like, hey, I have miles. Just take these. And I was like, holy mackerel. So before I knew it, I was in St. John. When I was leaving the island, I was on the plane, and the first thought that I had to myself was, I have to come back to this island, and I have to come back to this island on my own dime. So I made a promise to the island that I would be back in 1 year, come hell or high water. I can still see myself sitting on that tarmac, promising the island I would be back. So when I got home, I didn't even have a computer at the time, and I thought, I have to get a better paying job. I was making about 60, 65 at the time. So I went on to Monster.com, which at the time had an old-fashioned box. You had to click the highest box they had, and their highest box at the time was $100,000. I said, well, I got a lot of student loans. I got some debt from doing all the things I had to do for my mom. She didn't have health insurance. That's probably how much I have to make this happen. So that's the button I clicked. In 72 hours, now, okay, one warning went through my head, and the thought was, what if they ask me what I'm currently making? I won't lie. I'm not going to lie. Somebody in the audience shouted out loud. And I'm not saying there isn't a time and a place where you leave out certain information. But I really thought, I'm not going to lie about this because, first of all, I'm not going to get away with it. And second of all, I just don't like to lie. It just doesn't feel good in my stomach, So I just don't do it. So I thought, that's going to be a problem, but I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. So 72 hours later, very surprisingly, a headhunter called. A headhunter to this day I never met. And he said, I have a position that is $100,000 a year. He's like, and I think you're perfect for it. And he never asked me how much I was currently making. That entire interview process, this was my first hedge fund that I worked for at the time. The entire interview process, this is what I mostly did. I listened. Do you know how little my amount of talking was in these interviews? That is my other big heads up to everybody. You will get opportunities not because you're talking, but because you're listening. I had 3 really intense interviews with really high-powered guys, and they talked a lot. And I listened so well, so effectively, that when I came home from the interview, the headhunter said to me, they like you so much, you could ask for more. And I was like, more? Like, I didn't want him to know, but I was like, you gotta be out of your mind. He's like, that's how much they loved you. What happens when you don't talk and you listen? The person likes you. Because think about how many people today that you had a conversation with that you felt really heard you. Did anybody have a conversation like that today? With one person? The question is, did you have a conversation today? That's perfect, thank you. No, I didn't plan to. The question is, was there a conversation you had today where you felt somebody genuinely heard you? Anybody? Not one person? Raise your hand. Okay, one person. 2, 3. Awesome. That's so good. But isn't that kind of weird? At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, for only 3 people to feel like somebody genuinely heard them today? It's not cool. It doesn't feel good to feel like, God, I've talked all day to people, and nobody really listened. That is the key to networking. That is the key to building relationships. Listen to people. Really hear them. And then, best of all, come back to them having heard. Those 3 men that I spoke to that day in that hedge fund all had lots of money, flew private jets. But I was the first person, probably in their day, if not their week, who listened to them, who really heard what they said. That was priceless to them. That they were willing to send me to St. John within that year. And they did. That year, I made $250,000. Most of it in bonus, because I could listen, because I could connect to them. That's what's possible. That's what's possible for your business. That's what's possible for so many different, areas of what it is you're trying to create. It's really learning how to listen and be in that person's shoes. So, there's a million things still that I want to say, but I know there are questions. I'd love to hear, are there specific challenges that when you go to a networking event that come up for you, that you feel you would love to just have some input around? And it can be on any facet of your business around the sense of connecting. So if you have any, and you may not have any right this second, but if there's anything that comes to mind or places that you would have liked me to go that I didn't, how are you, Axel?
I'm fine, thanks. I get really excited when I go to conferences, and I love to talk, and I think I love to hear myself. So how do I focus to really listen and not just come up all the time with ideas and input I can give, but just step back and listen? How do you focus?
Okay, great question. I'm going to just repeat it in case anybody didn't hear it. He's asking, he said, I love conferences. I love giving input. I love advice. I think entrepreneurs do, right? I think entrepreneurs are naturally engaged in wanting to help somebody solve a problem. So that's a beautiful problem to have. Here's the key word. Would you like me to give you some input on that? After a day at this conference, I don't know about you, but I am on overload. My brain is saturated with information. I can't take in one more piece of information because I am full up, and I haven't even had a drink yet, right? Full to the brim with unbelievable, oh my God, I should have this, would have done that. That was such a great idea, couldn't I do that? How much do I have to pay for that to get done? Just ask the person, wow, that sounds amazing. And it's interesting because I worked on something like that last year. I have a lot of ideas. Would you like me to share that with you? Or maybe next week, I can send you an email with a couple of thoughts that I have. That allows that person to not take it in that moment. Yesterday, somebody was giving me priceless jewels of information. I couldn't receive it. Not because I didn't want to, not because I didn't love the person, not because I don't think they don't care, but because I had no brain power left, no bandwidth left. So I lost it all because I couldn't say to them, they didn't ask me, do you want this now or do you want this later?
I think there are so many people in our lives that we know, like the first inch of information, but there's so much underneath that we're not asking. Even in my own, like even if I take my own family, stuff that they're, I mean, not, my immediate family, but like, cousins and things that they like or things that they're specialties and things that, how do you, even in your day-to-day, I mean, I'm sure there's 100 people in this room and we probably have so much in common on a non-work level, but how do you find that next thing we have in common?
So the question was, how do we find that thing we have in common? How do we get past the superficial when we're in conversation even with people that we're close with? It doesn't take that much work, but it's just asking questions and being absolutely certain you stick around for the answers. Even if Brad Pitt walks in the room after you've asked, your 65-year-old uncle, what are you going to do now that you're going to retire? You can't let Brad Pitt come in, and the second that man is finally ready to be vulnerable, finally really like, wow, somebody asked me a genuine question. Oh, yes, Aunt Mabel, I'm coming for the orange layer cake. Like, you got to stay there and make sure you wait for that answer, because he will never open up to you again if in that one moment it's not there. So just ask a question that you think might be relevant to that person's situation. I think I already said this a few minutes ago. What is your need? Like, what do you need right now? That's great in business setting because people are kind of in that thought, but certainly with, relatives, that's not something you can really say. So you would say to them, but you can. You just have to phrase it differently. So, where's the place that they're maybe vulnerable right now? I think the reason is we're afraid to be vulnerable ourselves, and I think that helps. People are going to be more willing to be vulnerable to us if we're vulnerable to them. If we share a little bit of the soft belly underneath us, we think it's success, it's money that's going to make people be impressed with us. That actually intimidates people. That actually makes people go back. I'm not saying that a business doesn't want a successful you and a successful opportunity, but the more human that you are with them, the more that you let them know there is something human about you, that makes them go, wow, me too. That happened to you, that happened to me as well. All of a sudden, it levels the playing field. I don't know about you, but when I go to speakers, when I'm inspired by somebody, it's usually because I heard them. Yesterday, I actually was hoping to maybe have some kind of coordination with him coming in to talk here. Matt Lesko. I went up to Matt Lesko downstairs, the question mark guy, and within literally 5 minutes, he and I were like a heart-to-heart conversation. And the reason was because I was telling him he said, oh, what are you talking about? And I told him about authentic relationships and about, being vulnerable. He's like, that's why these question marks are on my suit. And I was like, huh? And he's like, you know what these question marks symbolize? I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I don't have the answers. The question marks symbolize that I have made mistakes. And I was like, I don't believe you're saying this. I was like, that's really what I'm trying to say to people. He's like, people think that everybody's walking around with the answers, and they don't realize that it's actually the opposite. So when you hear somebody, I don't know about you, but those suits that man is wearing, those are $3,000 suits. I can't believe he ruins them with question marks, but oh my God, that man's tailor is like, they're pristine material, gorgeous, gorgeous suits. But his whole humanity is what he was saying to me. What are you into? What do you need, Matt? Was my first question to him. He's like, I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out right now. I'm here because I'm investigating what that is. What does that make me think in that moment? Makes me, wow, maybe I can come up with some ideas from that to help this guy out because he's not sure what to do next, right? All of a sudden, I'm like, who can I introduce him to? How can I help him? So think that way. How can I help that person? There's a famous Hollywood producer. I don't think I even was ever told his name. He spends Thursdays calling people to see how they're doing. Very famous, very successful. He's got all the famous kind of movies behind him. But he dedicates Thursdays to connect, to call people and be like, hey, Joe, what's going on? Joe's not hot right now. Joe's not making any movies. Joe's not getting the big contracts. But he calls Joe because he knows that Joe is still a decent actor, a good guy, and maybe Joe's not working now, but I bet you, I don't know if this is his ulterior motive because I don't know the man, but I would imagine that he's thinking, in a year or two, what if Joe's back on top? Who's the only guy that called Joe when he was down and out? So when that producer calls him in 2 years and needs to make a deal, don't you think Joe is going to be a little bit more nicer to this guy who remembered him when he wasn't so famous? So that's his Thursdays. Thursdays is his day when he reconnects with people to just find out how they are. Find out what's going on for them. What do they need? Those little things, they enamored people. Why am I even here? Why am I here at the Affiliate Summit? I'm not an affiliate marketer. I'm here because I had a silver pass. I couldn't even get into these rooms for some affiliate marketer that I was doing sales for 3 years ago. And I had read Tim Ferriss's book, and Tim Ferriss talks about how did he get his book to the... I read it, when did his book come out? 4.5 years ago? I read it 4.5 years ago, right before it blew up. And I was paying attention to his media, and it was all relationship with bloggers. And he even talks about that. I built relationship with bloggers because that was the place I had entry. So that's what he did. He went all around the country, hung out with the bloggers, gave out his book, and all of a sudden, boom, there he was. And I thought, so I guess I got to go meet some bloggers. So what did I do? I had a silver pass, but I could get into the bloggers lounge. So I sat in the bloggers lounge, and I gave my coaching away for free. And lucky for me, I had some amazing people come and sit down. One of them was Ad Hustler, who turned around and then initially, was going to mess with me and not be so nice and, maybe give me a hard time. And he talked about this at his meeting, his panel discussion the other day, which, who can blame him? He's sussing me out. Is she legit? Is she full of, what? And so in the end, though, we hit it off. And he said, I want you to guest blog on my blog. Now, for this gentleman to ask me to do that is a big deal because he's Ad Hustler. He has a very high standard. And yet, he gave me that opportunity because I built something real with him. I'm not saying you can't use wisdom about, I was using wisdom. I was hoping to get myself opportunity. But at the end of the day, people will see through inauthenticity, and you need to be sure that what you're bringing on the other side is going to be authentic. Drew Bennett, who is now doing all of my IT, Ben Spark, unbelievable relationship. Jim Kukral, unbelievable relationship. Amazing human being, so much wisdom, so much advice he's given me. All of this has happened because of just meeting people, talking to them. That is all available to everybody for free. And the other thing I just want to really put forward, go after the famous big untouchables. They are so not as untouchable as you think they are. I love Seth Godin. I'm a big fan of his stuff. And I was at a workshop about a year ago. It was small business. I can't remember, but it's all small business. And you know him. He loves small businesses, so he's very supportive. And he wound up, so this was probably not the best time to hit him up, but I knew I'd have a very short window. So he was walking this way. Try not to talk to speakers right before they speak, but I had to. It was my only moment. So I was like, Mr. Godin, do you ever mentor people anymore? And he was like, no. And that was it. And I was like, ouch. So be vulnerable, be willing to get rejected, be willing to hear the no. So what happens? Of course, by the time I get to the book signing, 2 hours later after his amazing talk where people jumped out of their seats like we were in an evangelistic church, that man can talk, oh my God. He was signing books and I got to him and what happened? He remembered, this is the crazy lady who just asked if I would be her mentor. So he starts asking me about my business. And then he starts scolding me on the spot. Even though there's all these people behind me, he starts telling me what I'm not doing right and how I could do this better and I could do this much. And I was like, oh my God, he's so right. And I was like, and he was just like, like stay in touch. Do you know now I can write Seth Godin and he will write me back? Like within 2 hours, that man writes me back. That's like, my Brad Pitt of the marketing world. So, like, why? Because I was ballsy enough to stand in front of him and be like, would you mentor me? So he said no, but you know what? I'm kind of getting it, right? I won't tell him that, but And I actually, this was another example I gave to him. I was reading an amazing book about the preservation of soul in corporate America. It's called The Heart Aroused by David White. He's a famous poet, but what an amazing book. If you want to kind of know how to connect to corporate America, it's an amazing book about seeing the human side of it, of seeing the vulnerable side of the corporate structure and people. It's just beautiful. And I was reading that. I love Linchpin. I know some people didn't love it, but there were a lot of things in that about being unique, being your authentic, unique value proposition. To me, that said everything. So when I was reading this other book by David White, I thought, this is a book that I think would really resonate with Mr. Godin. So I wrote him an email, and I said, I just had this intuition all week. I kept thinking of you. I think you would really appreciate this book. It's a book that's 25 years old. You've probably already read it. But I just thought, you know what? I wanted to let you know about it. Do you know what he wrote me back? Kim, as I type this, that book is in my briefcase. What are the chances? But where was I coming from? I was coming from a place of like, this is something that would help that person. So start to be the guy or the girl who always remembers or thinks of your friend or buddy or client or associate. You know what? He loves X. When you come into town, bring him X. It doesn't always have to be a lot of money. Yankee tickets at the luxury suite, everybody likes those. You can't get those all the time. But maybe it's a BLT, well done. I don't know. There's something. Maybe it's a Magnolia cupcake cupcake for somebody. It could be anything, but it's just remembering them, that there's a human behind it. More questions? Is there any other kind of... Great. Sorry, I keep talking too much. The one thing I'm telling you all not to do.
Thanks, Kim. I'm going back to the Craigslist ad, the roommate. How much of this is potentially generational in terms of... I would believe that younger people are a little bit more willing to be vulnerable, and people more middle age, it's almost having to be a learned skill because that's not how we were brought up.
Did everybody hear that question? You need me to repeat it? The question was, is it a generational thing, a willingness to be vulnerable? Is it the younger generation now that are more willing to be vulnerable? This is a tricky question because I kind of feel a couple of opinions about that. In a lot of ways, the younger generation is right now really keen on revealing so much, right, via social media. But I have found when I have conversations with those same aged, teenagers, let's say teenage girls, teenage boys, 17, 18-year-olds, they're not very vulnerable in person. They're extremely shut down. I think the social media, on one hand, has given us an opportunity to start to reveal some things that are more vulnerable. But if we're not able to translate that in the human-human connection, it's kind of almost like the worst thing, because it appears like we're really being vulnerable, but we're really not. So I think, yes, to some extent, but, and again, I'm asking you to be vulnerable in small ways. If you're at an event and you're meeting somebody for the first time, say, like I had a really hard time getting here. I found traffic to be a nightmare. I just hit a couple of not nice people. Not lay on them. My wife asked for a divorce 5 minutes ago. I'm not talking like lay it all on the line, but let them in a little bit. Business hasn't been as good as it was last year. It's got me nervous. I just took out a second mortgage. A little peek into the real you, a little peek into like what's going on for you. Or if a 17-year-old, girl, a friend of a friend, when I talked to her, she said to me, I don't know what to do about the boys that ask me out. then she's letting me in a little bit. So I think it's tricky. I think it kind of makes us not be as vulnerable in person now as it could. Did you have a question? Oh, I thought you just raised your hand, sorry. Does anybody else have any questions or thoughts or how to?
So just as a follow-up to this same thought, does that actually create a little bit of maybe self-confidence by revealing something of yourself, making yourself vulnerable, and then maybe you get a little more self-confidence so then the other person actually sees and agrees? Would that be good advice to give, let's say, to my daughter? To be vulnerable when you talk to people, don't be shy, be a little vulnerable, reveal something of yourself, and then maybe they open up, and then she opens up. Is that kind of the idea?
It is definitely the idea. The idea was if you're being a little bit vulnerable, does that build your confidence, if you're willing? And I would say yes. I'm definitely telling you all, use wisdom. You don't want to be vulnerable with certain people. If somebody that you're meeting at an event is notoriously self-absorbed, that's probably not the person you want to be vulnerable with, right? They're not going to probably give you your attention. But if it's somebody that maybe just once or twice stepped on your toe and you're giving them the A, giving them the benefit of the doubt to let them redeem themselves, that I would say it does build confidence. It builds confidence in the sense that you suddenly feel authentic. When you're a little bit vulnerable with somebody and you let them in, you are not feeling like, the master of the universe that you think you need to be for whatever that conversation is. That lends to confidence. Wow, you mean who I am right now is enough? This right now is enough? That can make you really relaxed, and it can also help you to be connected to what that other person's needs are. And the other thing that's important at events when you go to them is to listen always, because how and what you do, I wear many hats. I mean, I have an executive coaching firm, but I do consulting for people. If I don't talk first, I get to find out exactly what's going on for that person, and I get to tell them what tool maybe is in my toolbox or what I have in that they could hire me for. So keep that in mind too. You want to find out as much information about what it is that person's situation is so that you can tailor what it is you say back to them really more strategically effective to help them. Yeah.
I don't know that it's as much of a question as it is just kind of a thought process, but as you're talking about be vulnerable and put yourself out there, there's quite often situations where you could just be very straight and to the point and the communication happens and you move on. If you stop and be vulnerable, what oftentimes happens is the other person really doesn't care what your vulnerability is. So how do you grow from that so that you put it out there, they really don't give a damn, and you continue the conversation without being caught off guard that they don't care? Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. Did everybody hear that? The question about, when you have, thank you, and you feel like, okay, did anybody ever see the movie A Bronx Tale? There's a great scene in A Bronx Tale where the young boy has lent $50 to a friend, and he can't get this kid to ever pay him back. And he has this, mentor who's a little bit in the mafia, and the mentor says to him, so what you just learned for $50 is that man is not trustworthy. Small price to pay. So in that moment, you just learned a lot about that person. Think you're going to want to do business with them? So think about the millions, thousands, hundreds of dollars you may have saved by finding that out. I think it's a great way of getting rid of the people you don't want to do business with. I don't want to do business with people like that. And so what happens to you? You're like, good, I got that figured out. What's wrong with you? Nothing.
So my question stick to this. I talked to Tim Ferriss. He had this zero tolerance policy about people taking energy most of the time. But some people are douchebags, but they don't really want to, It's a sort of wall, and I don't like the idea, as you said, I don't lie, and I don't like the idea to turn someone down and to say, no, man, I don't want to do business. I don't like your karma. How do you go away without being a scumbag and a douchebag on your own?
Yeah. So the question is, how do you say no to those you don't want to work with? What you can say, sometimes you can give the polite, you know what, I have so many clients right now, I can't take another one on, but I'll let you know. Little white lie. Or you can simply say to them, you know what, I'm not sure if we're both coming from the same place. The way I approach my business, I work with conscious capitalists myself, right? If I'm brought into an organization or a company wants to work with me, and they're like, so this is what we want to do, and this is what we've got going on, and our employees, da-da-da, and if I feel something's underhanded at work there, and they're bringing me in some way to, kind of manipulate, I'm out of there. So you don't have to make them wrong. I don't make anybody wrong. I don't like to judge people. Right and wrong, in my opinion, is arbitrary, right? It's societal, religious, all of that. But I'll just say, you know what? I think you and where you come from in business is different than how I play. And I think ultimately we're not going to really be effective together. I think we're coming down to time. Any other last questions, thoughts, comments?
Completely unrelated, but I can't find you on Twitter. Could you give us your Twitter thing?
Kim Ann Curtin. Curtin. It's just my name. KIMANNCURTIN. Like Jane Curtin. One quick story about Tim Ferriss. I was friends with Tim Ferriss 4.5 years ago, and guess what? I inadvertently pissed him off. So when I first started out, I did some work for Michael Gerber, and he was doing these things called dream rooms, and I didn't have online etiquette down. So I went onto one of his posts about whatever he was talking about, and I was like, hey, there's a dreaming room happening in New York, and I thought his people would want to know about it. Little did I know at the time that's like one of those trying to use somebody's blogs to advertise. Oh my God, I so didn't know. I loved this guy. I was like one of his first 25 reviewers on Amazon. I'm a crazy reader. So I was like, he cut me off. It was like The Door with the lady this morning. I killed her children. He cut me off. That was it. So just think about that. Don't act. I'm his biggest fan. I would be his biggest proselytizer. And I still am, right? I know he's just like, this girl was trying to use me, but I wasn't. So just remember, sometimes that's what's happening. Or that person maybe who didn't listen to you in that moment had a really bad day. Maybe they didn't, but you try a second time, maybe they're consistent, then out with them. Maybe we need a few more flowers. Can't hurt. Gerber daisies, that's the solution, ladies and gentlemen. All right, thank you so much. I appreciate you all coming.